So the Camper's fascia or superficial fatty layer, it is continuous with the superficial fascia of the adjoining area of the bodies, and over the penis it is devoid of fat, and in the scrotum it is replaced by an involuntary dartos muscle. Okay, so it means the superficial fatty layer or Camper's fascia, it become continuous with the adjoining area of the body. Okay, and over the penis and scrotum it doesn't exist. In the scrotum it is replaced by a muscle that is called dartos muscle. Now the Scarpa's fascia. The fascia scarpa or Scarpa's fascia in the midline, it is attached with the linea alba. On each side it is separated from the underlying external oblique muscle by a layer of loose areolar tissue, and below it crosses the inguinal ligament and gets attached to the fascia lata of the thigh, and it is prolonged over the penis to enclose it up to the base of the glans and forms the fascia of the penis, that is Bach's fascia. And in the scrotum, where it is replaced by the dartos muscle and then continues with the superficial fascia of the perineum, that is called Collis Fascia. And the Collis Fascia stretches across the margin of the pubic arch, and it is attached to the posterior edge of the irregenital diaphragm and border of the perineal membrane. And between the perineal membrane and Collis Fascia is known as the superficial perineal pouch. So have a look how the fascia Scarpa's fascia is attached. So this is the attachment of the fascia Scarpa. Look at that, fascia Scarpa. It encloses the penis, it encloses the scrotum, as well as the area in the perineum. So if you see it from a lateral view, it will be more easier. Look at that. This blue line is the fascia Scarpa. So look at that. It covers the part of the anterior abdominal wall. Then it covers the penis, and it is continuous with the fascia of the penis, that is known as Bach's fascia. Then it also encloses the scrotum, and it also extends into the perineum. What is perineum? In short, you can say the area around the anus. This is called perineum. Okay, so behind this, just behind the scrotum, it continues with the Collis Fascia, that is located in the perineum. This is the Collis Fascia, and between the perineal membrane and Collis Fascia is known as the superficial perineal pouch. This is called perineal membrane or urogenital diaphragm. Okay, so between the Collis Fascia and urogenital diaphragm or perineal membrane, this is known as the superficial perineal pouch. Okay, so this is the attachment of the fascia Scarpa. And look at that, the attachment of the fascia Scarpa with the fascia lata is marked on the surface by Hornus line. We told you that the fascia Scarpa in the below, it is fused with the deep fascia of the thigh, that is known as fascia lata, and it is marked on the skin as a Holden's line. So this is Holden's line. So what is Holden line? Holden line, we know the fascia Scarpa in the below, it is fused with the deep fascia of the thigh. Okay, at the point they meet with the deep fascia of the thigh, this point or line is known as Holden's line. Now come to another space, superficial inguinal space. It is a potential space in the anterior abdominal wall between the fascia Scarpa and epineurisis of the external oblique muscle. It is known as the superficial inguinal space. Where it is not shown. Now go to some clinical correlation. What is the importance of fascia Scarpa or fascia Camper's fascia? Why we should know this? The attachment of the fascia Scarpa's or Scarpa's fascia and Collis Fascia. That means fascia of the perineum. These are attached in the such way so that it prevents the passage of the extravasated urine due to urethral rupture backward into the ischiorectal fossa and downward into the thigh. That means these two fascia prevent the extravasation of urine due to urethral rupture into the ischiorectal fossa and thigh. I'm telling you it in so easy, in an easy way. That is, what is the importance of this fascia? Collis fascia and Scarpa's fascia. Look at that. Scarpa's fascia in the thigh. Scarpa's fascia in the thigh. It is fused with the fascia of the Scarpa's fascia. It is attached with the or fused with the fascia lata, or that means deep fascia of the thigh. So here is the Holden's line. So due to rupture of the urethra, if the urine comes out, they will go to the fascia Scarpa. But here at the Holden's line, they will be obstructed. So the urine cannot be get downwards to the thigh due to the attachment of the fascia Scarpa. And posteriorly, when this urethra ruptures, the urine will be accumulated in the fascia Scarpa, in the scrotum, in the perineum, up to the Collis fascia, up to this Collis fascia. Okay, and behind the Collis fascia, there is an area known as ischiorectal fossa. The area on each side of the anus, there is a fossa that is known as ischiorectal fossa. The fossa on each side of the anus is known as ischiorectal fossa. Due to the attachment of the Collis fascia, the extravasated urine due to rupture of the urethra, it cannot go into the ischiorectal fossa. That means, in short, these two fascia prevents the extravasation of the urine in different side. It prevents the extravasation of urine to go in the thigh or to go in the ischiorectal fossa. It prevents. Now, if the male urethra is ruptured in the perineum, the extravasated urine collects first in the superficial pouch of the perineum and then into the anterior-abdominal wall inferior to the umbilicus in the superficial inguinal space. So, if the urethra is ruptured, the urine is accumulated in the superficial perineal pouch and superficial inguinal space. And how we will identify if urethra is ruptured? By swollen perineum, that means the area around the anus is swollen scrotum, swollen penis, and swollen of the lower part of the abdomen. So the extravasated urine is collected in the superficial inguinal space and superficial perineal pouch. So this is superficial perineal pouch. Here the urine will be accumulated, and another one is the superficial inguinal space. The superficial inguinal space, what is this? It is a superficial perineal pouch. Superficial perineal pouch is the space between the perineal membrane and Collis fascia. So the urine will collect in the superficial perineal space in this area, and as well as the superficial inguinal space. Superficial inguinal space is a space between the fascia Scarpa and external oblique muscles. So this space. So if a urethra is ruptured and urine is come out into the different area, we will found the urine in the swelling in the lower part of the anterior abdominal wall, in the superficial perineal pouch. The scrotum will be swollen, the penis will be swollen. Okay. Due to the attachment of the fascia Scarpa, as it attached with the deep fascia of the thigh, the urine cannot be attached. The urine cannot be go to the thigh, and it cannot go to the ischiorrectal fossa due to the attachment of the Collis fascia. So that's the clinical importance. Now come to the cutaneous nerve of the umbilicus. The lower 6 thoracic nerve through the intercostal nerves and subcostal nerves, they supply the skin of the abdomen. Only the most inferior part is supplied with the first lumbar nerve through the iliohypogastric and ilioinguinal nerve. So lower 6 thoracic nerve supplies the abdomen. So you can see lower 6 thoracic nerve is the T7, T8, T9, T10, T11, T12. This lower 6 thoracic nerve supply the skin of the abdomen, and the lowermost part it is supplied by the lumbar 1 segment of the spinal cord. So that is the iliohypogastric nerve and ilioinguinal nerve. Iliohypogastric and ilioinguinal nerve. Okay, and among them lower 5, that means T7 to the T11, is known as the intercostal nerve. Okay, T12 is called subcostal nerve. And especially look at the level of the umbilicus. At the level of the umbilicus, the thoracic 10 segment of the spinal cord supply this area, and in this segmental innervation of the umbilicus, this is a frequently asked question in the viva. The area or skin around the umbilicus, which segment of the spinal cord supply this? That is the thoracic 10 segment. Now come to the cutaneous artery. Anteriorly, anterior cutaneous artery supply the abdomen. These are the branch of the superior and inferior epigastric artery. So the superior and inferior epigastric artery, they supply the anterior part, and in the lateral part there is the supplied by the area supplied by the branches of the posterior intercostal artery, and 3 superficial and inguinal artery, that is the superficial external pudendal, superficial epigastric, and superficial circumflex iliac artery. They supplies the skin of the abdomen below the umbilicus. So let's see this. Look at that. In anterior part of the abdomen, it is supplied by the superior epigastric artery and inferior epigastric artery. On the laterally, it is supplied by the posterior intercostal artery, and below the umbilicus, it is supplied by the 3 artery. That is the superficial epigastric artery, superficial circumflex iliac artery, and the last one is the superficial external pudendal artery. And look at that, all these 3 artery is coming from the femoral artery. Now come to the cutaneous veins. Look at that. Below the umbilicus, the veins run downward and drain into the great saphenous vein, and ultimately drain into the inferior vena cava. But above the umbilicus, all the veins drain into the axillary vein and ultimately drain into the superior vena cava. Now, the clinical significance of the superficial veins and the anterior abdominal wall anastomose freely with each other, and as well as with the small para-umbilical veins which drain the umbilicus. So the superficial veins in the anterior abdominal wall, they anastomose with each other, as well as they anastomose with the small para-umbilical veins which drain into the umbilicus. So in case of the, we know umbilicus, it is a site of portocaval anastomosis. So that means the site of anastomosis between the portal vein and caval system, superior vena cava or inferior vena cava. Okay, so if the portal vein is obstructed, the para-umbilical veins and the superficial veins in the umbilicus, which are anastomotic, they become grossly distended and tortuous, and they radiate out from the umbilicus like a spokes of a wheel, and they called this caput medusae because they look like the head of a Medusa, which is a lady in the Greek mythology. This is caput medusae. So when there is any portal vein obstruction, the portal vein, it is drained to the liver. Okay, it drained into the liver. Portal vein is formed by the 2 veins. One is superior mesenteric vein, and another one is the splenic vein. Okay, superior mesenteric vein and splenic vein together form the portal vein, and the portal vein ultimately drains into the liver. Now, if there is any portal obstruction, of vein obstruction, so there will be some the anastomotic vessels around the umbilicus, that means superficial veins of the abdomen as well as the para-umbilical vein, they were anastomotic with each other around the umbilicus. They become, due to obstruction, they become dilated and tortuous, and they look like a spoke of a wheel. This is called caput medusae. Then so in case of the portal obstruction, we will find this feature. So if there is any vena cava obstruction, that means obstruction of the superior vena cava or inferior vena cava, the thoracoepigastric vein connecting the saphenous and axillary veins opens up. Okay, and in the superior vena cava obstruction, the blood in the thoracoepigastric vein follows downward, and in the inferior vena cava obstruction, it flows upward. That means in case of the vena cava obstruction, if there is any obstruction in the superior vena cava or as in the inferior vena cava, there may be thoracoepigastric veins. These thoracoepigastric veins may be open up, and if there is superior vena cava obstruction, that means if there is an obstruction in the superior vena cava, the blood vessels swell up to the downward direction, blood flow goes to the downward direction, and if there is any obstruction to the inferior vena cava, the blood flow goes and it swells up to the upward direction. Okay. Now come to the superficial lymphatics of the anterior abdominal wall. Above the umbilicus, it drains into the axillary lymph node, and below the umbilicus, it drains into the superficial inguinal lymph nodes. And these lymphatic follow the watershed line in the umbilicus. So above the umbilicus, it drains into the axillary lymph node. Below the umbilicus, it drains into the superficial inguinal lymph node, and it acts as a watershed line of the umbilicus. Muscles of the anterior abdominal wall. Now come to the muscles. There are 5 muscles on the east side of the midline. There are the three among them. The 3 are the flat muscles and 2 are the vertical muscles. What are the flat muscles? External oblique, internal oblique, transverse abdominis, and 2 vertical muscles are the rectus abdominis and pyramidalis. Rectus abdominis and pyramidalis. So let's see. At first, come to the rectus abdominis. This is rectus abdominis. First, come to the origin. It originates from the 8 fascia splits from the outer surface of the lower 8 ribs. Look at that. Outer surface of the lower 8 ribs. That means 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And it arises from the 8 fleshy slips. Insertion. It goes downward, forward, and medially. The direction is so much important for the fiber. It goes downward, forward, and medially, and ultimately they inserted in the outer lip of the anterior to that of the iliac crest, outer lip, and ultimately they form a aponeurosis and inserted in the linea alba. So look at that. They inserted on the outer lip of the 2/3 of the iliac crest, this area, and ultimately they form aponeurosis. This green color is the aponeurosis of the external abdominal molluscus. Okay, they form aponeurosis and they ultimately attach to the linea alba. Okay. The most important thing, the free lower border of the aponeurosis, the free lower border of the external oblique aponeurosis muscle, the free lower border of the aponeurosis of the external oblique muscles, did become thickened and rolled inward. This become thickened and rolled inward, and it form a ligament that is known as inguinal ligament. Okay. And above the symphysis pubis in the aponeurosis, it presents a triangular gap called superficial inguinal ring. So what is inguinal ligament and superficial inguinal ring? Let's see. Look at that. This is the aponeurosis of the external oblique muscle. It is thickened and rolled inward to form a ligament. This is known as the inguinal ligament. This is the inguinal ligament. And just above the symphysis pubis, suppose if this is symphysis pubis, just above the symphysis pubis, there is a triangular opening. This is known as superficial inguinal ring. Okay. Now the nerve supply. The nerve supply is the lower 6th thoracic spinal nerve, that is T7 to T12. Now come to the internal oblique muscles. It originates from the lateral two-thirds of the upper surface of the inguinal ligament, anterior two-thirds of the iliac crest, and thoracolumbar fascia. Look at that, lateral two-thirds of the upper surface of the inguinal ligament, this red area, then anterior two-thirds of the iliac crest, the intermediate lip, and as well as some thoracolumbar fascia. From this area, the internal oblique aponeurosis muscle originated, and it is inserted. At first, the direction of the muscle you should know, that is upward, forward, and medially. Look at the upward, forward, and medially. It is goes. So the direction of the muscle fiber is the upward, forward, and medially, at the right angle of the external oblique muscle. Then where it is inserted? It is inserted in a broad aponeurosis, which is inserted in the 7, 8, 9 coastal cartilage. The linea alba, the Ziffert process, linea alba, which is attached to the Ziffert process up to the pubic symphysis, and is also attached with the lower part of the 3rd and 4th ribs with the coastal cartilage, deep tubercle, and pecten pubis. So where it is inserted? It is inserted along the coastal cartilage of the 7th, 8th, 9th ribs in the linea alba. The linea alba is attached to the Ziffert process of the pubic symphysis. That is also inserted in the pecten pubis also. Okay. Now, what is conjoined joint? A very important term. The conjoined joint, what is it is? The fiber of the internal oblique muscle, they fuse with the corresponding tendinous fibers of the transverse abdominis muscle. The fiber that fuses with the corresponding tendinous fibers of the transverse abdominis muscle to form a tendon, that is known as conjoined tendon. Conjoint means joining of two tendons. So the fibers of the internal oblique and fibers of the transverse abdominis muscle together they form a tendon that is known as conjoined tendon. Nerve supply is similar, lower 6 thoracic spinal nerves as well as the first lumbar nerve via the ilio hypogastric and ilio inguinal nerves. Now come to the transverse abdominis muscle. Transverse abdominis, the name says its identification. It is transversely lie or horizontally lies. Origin, it arises from the lateral one-third of the upper surface of the inguinal ligament, anterior two-thirds of the iliac crest, thoracolumbar fascia, and inner surface of the lower 6 ribs and their coastal cartilage. So this is the origin of the transverse abdominis. Look at it, the muscle fiber direction is transversely. And the origin is the thoracolumbar fascia, anterior two-thirds of the iliac crest, that is the inner lip, then inguinal ligament. So that is the origin. Now the insertion. It is inserted in the roof of the inguinal canal, and it also joined with the aponeurosis of the internal oblique and forms the conjoined tendon, which is ultimately inserted in the pubic crest and pecten pubis. Then it is also inserted in the linea alba, extending from the Ziffert process to the pubic symphysis. So the transverse abdominis is inserted in the linea alba, that is attached from the Ziffert process of the pubic crest, and together with the aponeurosis of the internal oblique muscles, it forms the conjoined tendon. The conjoined tendon is attached with the pubic crest as well as the inguinal ligament. Okay, that's it. And the nerve supply is similar, lower 6 thoracic nerve and first lumbar nerve via Ilio hypogastric inguinal nerves. Okay. Now come to the ilio-inguinal ligament. The ilio-inguinal ligament, ilio-inguinal or inguinal ligament. Some of the structures that derive from these three flat muscles. These are the inguinal ligament, conjoined tendon, and cremaster muscle. So let's see this. And first come to the inguinal ligament. We already told you that inguinal ligament is nothing but the lower border of the external oblique muscle. External oblique aponeurosis, it stretched, it become rolled and thickened in the lower border and formed a ligament, that is inguinal ligament, and it is attached between the anterior superior iliac spine and pubic tubercle. While we divided the abdomen into 9 regions, we told that the lower point for the vertical line will be the mid-inguinal point. That means between the anterior superior iliac spine and pubic tubercle. That is the mid-inguinal point. Okay, so here the inguinal ligament lies between the anterior superior iliac spine and pubic tubercle. And which muscle produces this inguinal ligament? External oblique aponeurosis. External oblique aponeurosis in its lower free border. Now, come to the conjoined tendon. Conjoined tendon, we already told you that the conjoined tendon is nothing but the fusion of the lower aponeurotic fibers of the two muscles, internal oblique and transverse abdominis muscle. And this conjoined tendon arches over the spermatic cord, and it is attached on the pubic crest and middle part of the pectineal line or pectin pubis. And the last one is a premasteric muscle. Premasteric muscle. Premasteric muscles consist of a series of loops of skeletal muscle fibers joined by the loose irregular tissue, the cremasteric fascia. This cremasteric muscle, it covers around the spermatic cord and testis. Now comes the vertical muscles. The number one is the rectus abdominis muscle. It is a long, this is rectus abdominis muscle. Look at that, it is long, flat and straight muscle. It is wider above, but it is narrower in the lower part. Look at that, and it has a three intersections at the different level. One is at the level of the Ziffert process, one is at the level of umbilicus, and one is between the Ziffert process and umbilicus. Now let's see origin. The rectus abdominis, it originates from the middle head and lateral head. Middle head arises from the anterior surface of the pubic symphysis, and lateral head arises from the lateral part of the pubic crest and pubic tubercle. So the medial end, it arising from the pubic symphysis, the lateral head arising from the pubic crest and pubic tubercle. Insertion, it is insertion in the anterior thoracic wall by 4 fleshy slips along a horizontal line laterally from the Ziffert process and cutting in the order of 7th, 6th and 5th costal cartilage. So 4 fleshy slips which is attached from the Ziffert process and 5th, 6th, 7th costal cartilage. Look at that. It is attached with the Ziffert process and along the 5th, 6th, 7th costal cartilage. So it's 6th, 7th costal cartilage. Now, it has some characteristic findings. Look at that, it has 3 tendinous intersections. We have told you one is at the Ziffert process, another one is the umbilicus, and the third one is the between the two. And sometimes a 4th intersection may also be present below the umbilicus. What is the function of this tendinous intersection? Tendinous intersection divides the long muscles column into shorter segment to provide more strength. For me, strengthening the muscle. This intersection is present, and we all know the six pack. We all know the six pack. The six pack is nothing but the when these muscles are hypertrophied on the east side. Look at that. Here is an intersection. On the left side, 1, 2, 3 intersections. So when a person get exercise, go to the gym, do some abs exercise, these muscles are hypertrophied. These muscles get swelled due to extreme workload. And look at that, between this intersection, 1, 2, 3. Okay. So 3 swelling on the right side and 3 swelling on the left side. these muscles become swelled due to workout, and this is called six pack, isn't it? The nerve supply is almost same, 5 intercostal nerve and subcostal nerve, that means thoracic 7 to thoracic 12, and action is flexion on the trunk of the pelvis. It has multiple action, later we'll know it. Pyramidalis, it is rudimentary in human beings. Sometimes it is not found. It is a small, very small triangular muscle lying in front, anterior to the lower part of the rectus abdominis muscle within the rectus sheath. It lies within the rectus sheath along with the rectus abdominis muscle. Origin, it arises from the body of the symphysis and pubic ligament, and it is inserted in the linea alba between the umbilicus and pubic symphysis. Now, what is the function of the anterior abdominal muscles? The anterior abdominal muscles provide strong and expandable support for the abdominal viscera and protect them. That means it provides support and protection of the abdominal viscera. Number 2, it increases the intra-abdominal pressure, thus helps in expulsive and expiratory efforts. So, what are the expulsive efforts? Coughing, sneezing, blowing, defecation, micturition, parturition. These are the expulsive forces of the abdomen, and it also helps in the move the tongue to maintain the postures. Now come to the rectus sheath. The rectus sheath is an aponeurotic sheath which encloses one muscle, that is the rectus abdominis muscle, and sometimes pyramidalis muscle if it is present, and it is situated on either side of the linea alba, and it is derived from the aponeurosis of flat muscles of the anterior abdominal wall. The function of the rectus sheath include it check the bowing of the rectus abdominis muscle during contraction, so it increases its efficiency and maintaining the strength of the anterior abdominal wall. So the rectus sheath is nothing, that is an aponeurosis that covers the two muscles, rectus abdominis and pyramidalis muscle. Okay, and the rectus it is situated on the anterior abdominal wall on each side of the linea alba. What are the features? It has two layers, anterior layer and posterior layers or posterior walls. Anterior wall is complete and covers the entire extent of the muscle from the upper end to lower end. So the anterior wall is complete and it covers the whole muscle. But the posterior wall is deficient above and below. Above and below, the posterior wall is deficient. Why? Because above it is attached to the costal margin to the 7th, 8th and 9th costal cartilage, and below it presents a free curved margin with concavity inferiorly. It is called arcuate line, a line of Douglas between the umbilicus and pubic symphysis. Below this level, the muscle lies directly on the fascia transversalis. Later we'll see the figure, so it will be more clear. And look at that, the anterior wall of the rectus sheath, it is firmly adherent to the tendinous intersection of the rectus abdominis. So the tendinous intersection, 3 tendinous intersection of the rectus abdominis, these are attached with the anterior wall of the rectus sheath, but the posterior wall is free from the muscle. That means posterior layer is not attached with the muscle. Now the formation. So let's see the rectus fascia. So rectus sheath. We told you that in the feature, the rectus sheath has two layers, anterior layer and posterior layer, or anterior wall, posterior wall. So this is the anterior wall, and this green is the posterior wall. Okay. You can see there are the 3 intersections of the rectus abdominis muscle. They are attached with the anterior wall of the rectus sheath, but the posterior wall it is devoid of this. And look at that, in the anterior wall it covers the whole rectus abdominis muscle, but the posterior wall it is deficient in the above and the below. And look at that, the extension from where it starts and where it lies. So it extended, rectus sheath extended from the costal cartilage and it is inserted in the arcuate line. The arcuate line is line between the umbilicus and pubic symphysis. Okay. Now how the rectus sheath is formed. Okay. So in the 3 level it is formed differently. Now at first above the costal margin, the rectus sheath is formed by the aponeurosis of the external oblique muscles. It forms the anterior wall, but here the posterior wall is deficit. Now come to the between the costal margin and arcuate line. The anterior wall of the rectus sheath is formed by the external oblique aponeurosis and anterior lamina of the internal oblique aponeurosis. And the posterior wall, here it is present, it is formed by the aponeurosis of the transverse abdominis and posterior lamina of the internal oblique aponeurosis. And below the arcuate line, the rectus sheath is formed by the anteriorly by the aponeurosis of the external oblique, internal oblique and transverse abdominis. That means all 3 flat muscles aponeurosis form the anterior wall of the rectus sheath, but posteriorly the posterior wall is the deficit. It rests on the fascia transversalis. Now the content. What are the contents in the rectus sheath? So we have told 2 muscles. It is the rectus abdominis and pyramidalis muscle. Number 2, 2 arteries, superior epigastric artery, inferior epigastric artery, 2 veins, superior epigastric vein, inferior epigastric vein, and 6 nerves, lower 6 thoracic nerves, including the 5 intercostal nerve and subcostal nerve. That means thoracic 70, thoracic 12. So let's see the content. The 2 muscles, rectus abdominis and pyramidalis. Pyramidalis is not always present; it is rudimentary. And the vessels. Look at the superficial epigastric artery and superior epigastric artery and inferior epigastric artery. And we can see the nerves also. Okay, thoracic 10 to thoracic 12, segment of the spinal cord. Okay, now come to the our next layer is the fascia transversalis. So what is fascia transversalis? It is a thin layer of the fascia that lines the inner surface of the transverse abdominis muscle, and it is superiorly it is attached with the inferior aspect of the diaphragm, and that is diaphragmatic fascia, and inferiorly it is attached with the lining of the iliacus muscle, the iliac fascia. The important feature, one you have to know, here is an important thing, that important structure, that is deep inguinal ring. What is deep inguinal ring? It is an oval opening, a small oval opening about 1.25 or 1.2 centimeter above the mid inguinal point. That is called deep inguinal ring, which provides the passage of the spermatic cord in female and round ligament of the uterus in the female. Okay, so deep inguinal ring lies on the over the fascia transversalis. It is a oval opening 1.25 centimeter above the mid-inguinal point called deep inguinal ring, and it provides the passage of the spermatic cord in case of the male and round ligament of the uterus in case of the female. So that's all about from the anterior abdominal wall. In the next class we will discuss about the inguinal region, about details about the inguinal ligament, about the hernias, about femoral sheaths, femoral canal, inguinal canal, as well as the content of the inguinal canal, most important for the viva, triangle of vessel packs, and hernias, different types of hernias, the types, the classifications. Okay, so till then, goodbye.